Good afternoon, all. Okay, I think we're good. Good afternoon. I think we're connected now. This week's Parshat is Parshat VaYishlach. I've entitled this The Curative Power of Challenges. And we all know that throughout Bereshit we're going to see many challenges. We've already seen them. It happens in our lives. The question is, what do we do with them when they occur? So after an absence of 20 years in exile, Yaakov is going to return to the land of his family. He knows well that he's going to confront Esau, his brother, and is both fearful due to past history and simultaneously exhibits his faith in God by prayer, as well as he prepares for the conflict, potentially, with his estranged brother. Definitely multitasking on an existential level, if you will. We read in our first verses indication of these complicated dynamics. And Yaakov instructed the angels as follows: "This you must say to my master, Esau, le'Esau, Adoni." We've spoken in the past about how addressing the other indicates either the closeness of the relationship or the formality of the relationship or the distance in the relationship. For example, we've watched language as we develop Abraham's relationship with God and Yitzchak's relationship as well, looking at more familiar verbiage versus more formal. So here we have this formal verbiage. This is what you should say, le'Adoni le'Esau, to my master Esau. So is he acquiescing? Is he being humble? Is he being fearful? This is the way that Yaakov addresses the messengers at this point. He says, I have been living with Lavan, Im Lavan garti, ve'acher ad ata. I've delayed my return home, says Rashi, until now. By the use of the word garti, Rashi wants us to consider, I have been sojourning with Lavan, but again, being acquiescing, being humble, not wanting to inflame Esau, not wanting to revisit old wounds. I was a sojourner. I did not become a noble. I did not become a person of importance. So you do not need to hate me on account of your father's blessing. And here again, when it says, Avicha, your father. Now, Yitzchak was his father as well. But as Nechama Leibowitz always teaches us, watch the pronouns, because the pronominal suffixes here indicate to us what relationship is being invoked. So here, Yaakov is invoking the connection between Esau and Yitzchak. I was only a sojourner. I was not a noble. Don't hate me on account of your father's blessing, with which he blessed me. May you be master over your brother. For it has not been fulfilled in me. So, looking at this pronominal suffix, we have to ask, is Yaakov distancing himself from Yitzchak, or is he amplifying the relationship that Esau had with his father and doing honor to him in doing so? So why does he wait until now? He has acquired wealth, so has Esau. But maybe time needed to pass, maybe time needed to heal, maybe each had to fulfill their own mission. But notice the reunion here, we're making some progress, is not at a funeral, as it was with Yitzhak and Ishmael, but still during their lifetimes, after so many experiences had separated them. He then, after this kind of self-deprecating entry into the conversation, says, I have acquired so much: cattle, donkeys, flocks, servants. I'm now sending my word to you, my master. He repeats again, la'Adoni, my master, that I am coming to you in friendship in order to gain favor in your eyes. I've been blessed and you have been blessed. So let us come together as equals, is the tone here. I am at peace with you, says Yaakov to Esau. I want your love. I want to fix this relationship. So here we see that both of them have both suffered from the estrangement and benefited They've each grown, they've each moved in their own direction, and they each have acquired a certain degree of influence. But now, what is being asked is, let's add to that our shared inheritance and come to terms with each other during our lifetimes in a positive manner. This is what I see in the text, in the language, and in the approach, and in the trajectory of the conversation as well. We go back to the text. The angels returned to Yaakov saying, we came to your brother Esau. And in response to this announcement, this is what he is doing. He's coming to meet you, v'gam holech likratecha v'arba me'ot ish imo, bringing 400 men. We came to your brother Esau, says Rashi, showing love, all of this, but he is behaving in a wicked way. He's persisting in his hatred. Now, this is Rashi's take, because remember, Rashi kind of uses color blocks a lot of times when giving us the characteristics of individuals and wants to have, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy. But what is going on here? Is this a reaction to when Yaakov said, I have wealth? And Esau wants to indicate, well, I have wealth too. Are we coming together as equals? Although the text goes on and explains, Yaakov was very frightened and distressed. Yaakov ma'od. He divided the people who were with him into two camps, thinking that if one camp is attacked, at least I'll have the other one still okay. It's clear that the hard feelings and impact of the past have not been forgotten. This is human nature. Yaakov and Esau experienced it then, and we still acknowledge its presence today in our own reality. How many times is history invoked to indicate ongoing strife? And then what do we do to continue that strife in our own lives? Perhaps this is the case with establishing relationships while maintaining necessary boundaries, as we spoke last week. This may be yet another reality that we must confront about the nature of humanity. As I always say, not everything is a kumbaya circle. Sometimes we are talking around a table with certain provisos in place to structure those conversations. Yaakov raises his eyes in our text and sees Esau approaching with 400 men. So he divides up the children. He places the servants and their children in front of the Bilhah and Zilpah, and Rachel, Leah, her children next, and Rachel and Yosef last. The later they were placed, says Rashi, the more beloved they are to Yaakov. So we understand that. Bilhah and Zilpah, then Leah, then Rachel. He goes ahead of them. Now we go back. Prostrates himself 7 times as he approaches his brother. Bows down 7 times. At this point, we read, V'yaratz Esav likrato, v'ychabkehu v'yipol al tzivarav, v'yishakehu v'yibchu. Esau runs to him, embraces him, throws himself on his neck, and kisses him, and they weep. Now, the text on its own looks like this is, in fact, some type of very emotional reconciliation. So, Rashi, how do we square away? What calculus do we do to understand that Esau comes by Yichabkehu and hugs him, throws himself on his neck? So Rashi says that Yaakov's compassion was so great that when he was acquiescing to Esau, he aroused the compassion in Esau, almost discounting the possibility that it could be Esau's on his own. Now, one little interesting note, when we see the word VaYishlach and he kissed him, there are 3 dots over the word. There is a difference of opinion in a Braita and Sifri about this. Some explain that the dots mean that he did not kiss Yaakov wholeheartedly, that he still held and harbored some negative feelings. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says it's known that Esau hates Yaakov, but at that moment, his compassion was raised, so he kissed him wholeheartedly. So whether he was hesitant and he didn't, or whether he did it perfunctorily, like that's, not, or whether it was meaningful, or whether it was the emotion of the moment. Again, all possible human reactions for sure. Maybe by pointing out all these possibilities, we are accentuating the complicated and conflicted emotions that are present at this moment. And again, as human beings, we understand this. We are often put in situations where we are interacting with people with whom we have very mixed emotions. And our actions may in fact convey a mixture of possible reactions that evolve from those emotions. Esau raises his eyes, sees the multitudes, and he says, so how are all these people related to you? And what does Yaakov say? Hayeladim asher chanan Elokim et avdecha. These are the children that God has been gracious enough to grant to your servant. Again, notice the pronominal suffixes. That's part where we're holding on to that formality, and through that formality hoping that some distance will be protective and that old wounds will not reappear. The reunion will be only for a while, and then Yaakov is to continue on his journey, which will be differentiated from that of Esau. And again, we've spoken about this, that different journeys take us to different places. We may come from a similar starting point, but we may have very different missions, very different trajectories in our lives. Think about a family where children are brought up by one set of parents, and yet they may go off in very different directions. And that can bring about pain. It can bring about complicated feelings. It can bring about dissension. It hopefully can also bring about an understanding that we are not all meant to go in the same direction. We are not automatons. We are each given agency of choice and reason. Yaakov goes on his journey, and he arrives safely in the city of Shechem, which is in Canaan. He camps out in view of the city. He purchases land on which he pitches his tent from the sons of Shechem's father. He erects an altar there, and what does he name the altar? El Elokei Yisrael. God is the God of Israel. So now, whatever unresolved feelings there may be in this reunion, Yaakov is actually free to begin the next chapter of his own life. He arrives whole, or shalem, after the many challenges that he has confronted. His limp from the dream, his fighting with the angels is over, and he is whole. He is at peace, ready to move on, with what could be resolved completed, and what could not be resolved accepted. And that's the reality. Just like last week we talked about boundaries may work to make good neighbors. Here we need to acknowledge some of what angsts us, upsets us, can be resolved and some cannot. As that saying goes, strength to change what you can, the fortitude to accept what you can't, and the wisdom to know the difference, or whichever order that comes in. This is human reality. While Rashi wants us to accept the term shalem as complete and not corrupted with sin from living with Lavan so long, Aviva Zornberg suggests that this refers to the closing of a circle, the end of his exile, as well as his reabsorption into his father's house and ability to continue the destiny of his father, ready to add his own chapters, as we have also discussed. She claims that he does not merely desire such a return, but sets himself in full intentionality on a course of preserving a certain original integrity. Notice the two active initiatives here. One, purchasing land to own, and then two, building the Mizbeach to God. This confirms Yaakov's path. In other words, retrospectively, it appears that he had to separate himself from that main story. If you were to look at this in a literary way, which is very appropriate when we talk about Aviva Zornberg because she has her doctorate in English literature, what you notice is, we all started, and those of us that, aspire for the Kumbaya circle say we all come from Adam, we all come from Abraham, all of that. But there's this siphoning off that keeps going because people have to forge their own individual paths. And as we have said, and as we will continue to say, as we tell our story and separate it out from history or the global story, and it becomes our story instead of his story, it doesn't mean all the time acceptance requires rejection, but rather different acceptance modes on different paths. He must separate himself in order to fulfill certain goals that would facilitate his continuity. By successfully confronting the challenges that he has encountered and doing so successfully, he could now return whole, prepared to go on to the next chapter, which will have its own challenges and potential setbacks, all the while maintaining a clear-headed vision of where he would be going. Further, I would suggest that there is another really important lesson here regarding identity. Returning back to the beginning of our Parsha, we learned that Im Lavan Garti ve'echar adata. As Rashi said, that Yaakov lived as a sojourner with him and delayed his return until now. Rashi reminds us that the word Garti, Gimel, Resh, Taf, Yud, has the numerical value of 613. Here is a template for how we live with and among others. We maintain our own identity, Garti, while interacting with those around us who are different and may live in ways that are in contrast to our own ideals. Simultaneously, Garti, I maintain my identity, my mitzvot, my way of life, and don't compromise that while I am in this other, if you will, to use present sociological terms, a majority culture. Here Yaakov wants Esau to know, according to Zornberg, that he has not changed, that his values are the same as those with which they have been brought up. Here, his financial wealth came after he had given a good deal of property to Esau. Being cured of his injury with the conflict with the angels leads to greater physical strength. Keeping his life practices intact during all of these challenges is what leads to his well-being, and in that case, he is shalem, complete. Zornberg sums this up as follows. To be whole, apparently, means to have been in great danger and to have been saved. Yaakov's integrity has been significantly assailed on many levels, but losses have been recouped, injuries healed, and the erosion of memory successfully fought. There is just a bit of mirroring of the text from the end of chapter 32, a bit earlier, when we learn about a change for Yaakov. The angel then says, send me on my way. Dawn is breaking. Yaakov says, I will not send you unless you bless me. The angel says, what is your name? He says, Yaakov. The angel then says, no, it will no longer be Yaakov. It will now be Yisrael. For you have striven with the angel of God and with men, and you have prevailed. Yaakov then inquires, please tell me your name. And what does the angel reply? Lama zeh tishal lishmi v'yirecha tosham. Why are you asking me my name? And he blesses him right there. To accompany this new level of the journey on which Yaakov Yisrael will embark, and it, by the way, I just as a parenthetical comment, often explore the notion of when this individual is called Yaakov, when this individual is called Yisrael. Is it when he has the upper hand, lower hand? Is it personal versus communal? I think there's a lot there that we can think about in terms of identity points. We're all not just one thing, but we're this, as I often say, a complex Venn diagram of many different aspects. And when we see certain of those aspects, we have Yaakov. When we see others of those aspects, we have Yisrael. But to accompany this new level of journey on which he will embark, we have a naming ceremony of sorts, indicating both his past successes at meeting challenges and Yisrael, hopes for success in future ones as well, as exemplified by the new and perhaps more powerful name. And make no mistake about it, both names indicate some level of struggle. Yaakov on the heel, struggling to get out. Yisrael struggling with those forces that are coming at you. But in the end, Yaakov will emerge stronger from his being tested on so many levels. To be sure, there will be more to come. And we are to imagine that he is up for the challenge, that he is ready. I'm writing this, and I wrote this, because as you know, I write these pieces well in advance. I'm not a last-minute person. So I actually wrote this while Ken and I were in Israel in November, more a year after October 7th, with numerous threats, always active in Israel from all borders. Resilience is certainly all around on many levels, and while clearly, when we go through such difficult and daunting challenges, it is by turning inward and preparing outward that we will succeed. Yaakov goes through his own internal challenges, fights with the angel, emerges, he meets Esau, he sets all of his people out there. He prepares himself both internally and externally. And in Israel, everyone is doing this as well. This is the only way we will survive. In Israel, you go about your daily life, you have faith in God, and you run to the shelters when you have to, or you take whatever precautions you need to at any minute. This is just part of daily life. This is not to set Yaakov up as the perennial hero for all. As we know, he used trickery, and many suggest that, for example, Lavan's tricking him was just justified as measure for measure, midah keneged midah. There have been challenges in his past and in the future. He will continue to confront them, including the problem involving Dinah and his son's reactions, which we'll read about later, the disappearance of Yosef, and so on. Nonetheless, just because we have triumphed over one challenge, this in no way portends that there will not be others. To be sure, there will. That's life. And we will have to rise and meet them as Yaakov did. And invoked by his new name, we will all rise and be prepared outwardly as well as inwardly to move forward. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono L'Shalom, puts this in the following light, and I would suggest that we take a life lesson from here. When Yaakov wrestles with the angel, he receives his new name, Yisrael. The very name symbolizes his struggle and victory over divine and human challenges. This is when Yaakov's character fully emerges. As Yisrael, he faces challenges head-on, moving beyond small subterfuges. And that's the distinction he's making between Yaakov and Yisrael. His transformation from Yaakov to Yisrael mirrors an important thread throughout Jewish history, the determination to embody not only quick-wittedness, as did Yaakov, and learnedness, but also moral courage and heroism as Yisrael. Yaakov must become Yisrael. Yaakov must become Yisrael. For it is not the quick-witted victor, but the hero of moral courage who stands tall in the eyes of humanity and God. However, there's a most important footnote here. No matter how much we show integrity, this too will not guarantee success. While the very challenges that made us strong up until this point are behind us, we must always be at the ready for new ones that will confront us. For it is working through these obstacles that the human spirit is exercised and continues to become stronger and more resilient. May it continue to be so with all of us. Am Yisrael Chai, and with prayers for all good and honest people with integrity who continue to suffer in our very broken world. Shabbat Shalom.